Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for hanging out. And it's gotten a little cooler here in Austin, which I just love. And so I started editing some photos from Germany that had some snow in it because I was like, hey, winter, it's coming. Winter is coming. Anyway, I was in On1 and I'm playing around with a photo. Here it is. Now I have cropped the photo and I've also done some transform, which took it from that where it's kind of leaning back a little bit to that where it's much straighter. This is a beautiful little scene outside of Munich? Yeah, I think we're outside of Munich. God, it's been a while. Anyway, I love Germany. Have I said that here before? I just absolutely adore Germany. Anyway, I started playing around with the photo, and after I did the basic stuff, which for me is you get the canvas set first before you edit. So that's the straightening if you need to, the cropping if you need or want to, and of course the verticals if you want or need to. So having done all that, I came in here and I started just doing these kind of things where I was like, you know, I'm going to add some contrast. I'm going to take the midtones down a little bit, maybe something about like that. I'm going to lift the shadows maybe a little bit, just, you know, kind of balancing the light, just kind of having a good time. And that was about it, right? So I was like, hey, you know, it looks a little bit better. It's not amazing, but it's fine. And this was where I was like, you know, I love color, right? You know that if you've been here before. And but, you know, this kind of scene, I look at it and then, you know, apart from the obvious, like it's wintry and snowy and there's a lot of white in it, it just kind of screams monochrome to me. So this is where I kind of said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this one a black and white because that's going to look super cool. So I went ahead over to the effects tab, added a filter, added black and white. And, you know, obviously it converts it to black and white immediately. But if you remember, let me turn this off. There's some blue and some green in this scene. So what I want to do is manipulate those a little bit. So I'm taking the green down by 100 and the aqua and the blue just in case. And basically pull down some of those cooler tones and basically I'm decreasing the brightness of them essentially, right? So I got that done and I was like, hey, I like it, but you know, it's missing something. It's not very impactful. It's just like it looks still like I just converted it to black and white and didn't do anything else. And so one of the cool things about their black and white filter is, of course, that you have all these additional controls. So I went in here and said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this thing higher contrast because I think, especially if you have snow, if you can keep from blowing it out and making it so white that it's blinding, then which I'll show you a trick for that. But if you can add, you know, high contrast and you got these snow, it just looks cool, I think. So I did that contrast, and then I actually took the shadows down as well. So it's basically creating a little bit more contrast because I'm darkening the stuff that's dark as well as increasing the contrast, which is accentuating that difference between light and dark. So having done that, I thought the black and white looked a little bit better than it did without this bit of contrast here. So just keep in mind you have that tone section. You also have toner, which is kind of like split toning where you can adjust colors. I'm not going to do that in this one. And there's film grain, which you could add grain to a photo, which I honestly would never do. Nothing wrong with it. If you like grain, totally cool. This is not a religious debate. I just don't like it. So I didn't use it. Anyway, so I was there, and the next thing I thought was, I was like, you know, it could be a little bit sharper. It could be a little bit sharper. So I had the sharpening tool, and that's a bit much. So I'm pulling it down to like maybe 20 or something like that. It gives it a nice little pop of sharpness without feeling like it's really just like in your face. It also, I think, accentuates some of the look of the snow on the trees. If I turn this off, let me show you. There it is before, and then back on. There it is now. It's minor. Anyway, I liked it, so I added it to the photo. Now, the next step for me was to manage the light a little bit more. There's some specific things I want to do, and this is where Tone Enhancer comes in so handy. I love having Tone Enhancer. It's basically like a lot of the things on the Develop tab over here, but just in this filter, which it lets me really basically manage the light. So what I did here, the first thing I wanted to do is really make that river a little bit brighter. So I basically just bumped up the exposure. So I went to about a 0.7, and then I went into, and that's of course applying globally right now, but I went into the masking tool, I inverted, and then I'm going to reduce the size of my mouse, and I'm going to paint in, and I'm also going to adjust the flow. You can see it's at 58. The flow will default to 100, and that's basically like a low flow. You'll have to go over it more times to get to the full effect. At 100, the full effect of that brightening will go in on one swipe, but I wanted to build it up over time, so I had the flow down, and so I'm going to go like, you know, 50 or something, high 40s. And basically just come in here with my brush and you can see I'm just kind of brushing in a little bit around here in the water, and just kind of, I just want to brighten it a little bit. I just feel like it's not quite bright enough, because the other thing I want to do is kind of accentuate the river. It's the line kind of leading you into the frame, bordered by dark black stone on either side, kind of leading you into the frame, into the church a little bit. So I wanted to create that brighter kind of path, and so I'm using that the tone enhancer here to do that for me. Now, if I click on view, you can see my mask. I kind of purposefully skipped over the rocks there in the creek because they're darker, and I kind of like how that breaks it up a little bit. And that's really all I was doing here, is just basically increasing the brightness in the river. So one more time, there it is before. It's a little bit more muted, kind of silvery, kind of gray, and there it is now. It's definitely brighter. I could always pull back the opacity if I felt like it was too much, but I like it the way it is, so I'm going to leave that. But here's the thing. I also want to do some tone enhancer around the rest of the image. So one of the beautiful things is, of course, you can use these filters again and again. And so I've got tone enhancer a second time. And this time I'm going to go in, I'm just going to bump up the exposure a little bit overall, the entire photo. Just to do that, pull down the shadows a slight bit, which is, again, I'm just kind of basically accentuating the contrast, and also pull down the blacks a little bit. Now, I'm not actually adding contrast here with the contrast slider, but I did brighten the photo, so everything gets a little darker, but then I pulled back on the shadows and the blacks just to create a little bit more contrast there. It's not a massive difference, but there it is before, and there it is after, a little bit brighter, especially in the sky. And by the way, I mentioned earlier, I'm going to hit Z to get out of the masking brush. I mentioned earlier a little trick for checking to see if you're blowing things out, because for a while I was looking at that snowbank on the right-hand side here of the river, this big white, patch in the foreground here in the photo on the right side, and I was like, ooh, I feel like I'm dangerously close to kind of blowing this out. But you can hold down the J key, and when you hold down the J key, it will bring up any highlighted areas that are blown out, or any shadowed areas that are too dark. In blue, you can see on the left-hand side, under that tree kind of tucked over there, there's a couple little blue spots. Those places highlighted in blue are basically complete black. Fine with me, I want black. But you notice there's no red. Now, let me pull these whites way up, and I'm going to exaggerate this. And now I hit the J key. You can see all the areas in red are basically blown out, which is, hey, it's complete white, right? So the blue highlight is complete black, which you can still see on the left-hand side, and the red highlight is complete white. Well, I don't want that. That is way too over white for me, so I pull it back. In this case, I'm not even going to change it, but overall I've just managed it so I don't have to mess with that. And again, hold down the J key, the red stuff looks fine. And now that I've done that, I actually think I'm going to add it a little bit more white to it, just because I like that contrast. Hit the J key, I'm still not seeing anything. Oh, actually I see maybe a tiny bit over there, but it's almost imperceptible, so I'm going to consider that not a problem. So that's it for tone enhancer. And at this point, honestly, I was done with the photo. I like it quite a bit. Let me show you the before and after. There it is before. Beautiful scene. And not something where I feel like I can really do a lot to accentuate the color, because the blue is not really going to work. I don't want to really, as much as I love blue skies, and I love them, but blue is not really going to work so much there. I think it looks better white. And it accentuates the idea of it being snowing and being winter, which of course it was winter, and I think it had snow. Obviously it had snowed, but I think it snowed some while we were there, but whatever. It wasn't snowing, I don't think, at the time I took this photo. But there it is before, and there it is current state. And so I got here and I was like, I'm done, and I thought, you know what? There's one other thing I can do, which is kind of fun, and that is they have a weather filter here in On1, and it just allows you to add things like rain or snow into your photo. So I'm going to go into the More menu, and I'm going to go and click on this thing called Sticking, and Sticking is basically a snow overlay. You can see that snow there now. Now you've got various things that you can do here to edit that. I'm not going to do it. I like it. It's especially obviously mostly visible in the sky where you've got that gray background, but you can kind of see it in front of the house there. Obviously, you're not going to see it in front of the snow in the foreground. Totally fine with me. And if you wanted to, you could adjust the opacity a little bit to pull that back. I actually think I'm going to leave it at 100, but just a fun way to wrap up a photo. Kind of gets me in a wintry mood, and I'm in Texas. I would say it doesn't snow, but last year in February, we had such a big snowstorm. I lost power for 4 days. and we had like a foot of snow. It was awesome, yet terrible because we were freezing. Anyway, there it is without the overlay, and there it is with. So a cool thing about that is you don't have to go get a new layer or do any of that kind of stuff. It's literally just built in as a filter, a couple of clicks, and you're done. That's it, my folks. High impact, visually appealing, at least in my opinion, and very high contrast monochrome image. Just some ideas for you to play around with. Hope it helps, my friends. Thanks for hanging out, all that kind of stuff, and coming back and visiting. Hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you guys really soon, and adios.